We are now joined by the Deputy Head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Mr. Igor Zhovkva. Mr. Zhovkva, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Ukraine is actually facing right now a full-scale Russian invasion on all fronts, and Kiev is a besieged city. So how long do you expect to last, provided that all Russian forces are amassing around Kiev right now?
Well, yes, one of the targets of Russian armed forces since the beginning of the open war against Ukraine was encircling and capturing the capital of Ukraine, the city of Kiev. They plan to do it within 3 or 4 first days of war, to have a kind of blitzkrieg. Now we are having the 20th day of war, and Kiev is far away from being encircled. Yes, they are trying to cut off some directions and connections. They are severely bombarding the outskirts of Kiev in almost all directions. But for the time being, Kiev is functioning. The authorities are functioning. The defense forces are ready to defend the capital. Definitely, they will try to have the offensive on Kiev. We have information that they will going to have, the last strike on Kiev in the nearest day to come. But be sure that we are absolutely ready to defend it. It would be very symbolic to encircle Kiev and to have a kind of, for them, and to have a kind of situation of blockade as they are now having in Mariupol, because still there are 2 million people of population left in Kiev, but all of them are ready to fight and ready to defend their capital.
Now, having said this about Kiev, obviously there are many troops outside, but yesterday we just had the 4th day of talks in the borders of Ukraine and Belarus. The question is, what did it actually come out of it? What are the expectations? Because both sides, both you as well as Russian, have been very optimistic for the outcome. But nevertheless, we saw nothing that came out. There was no white smoke, if you like.
Well, yes, right, you are. There is a 4th round of negotiations taking place. Yesterday they were terminated, and today they will be continued on the video format. So the delegations are not meeting today in person. Yes, the general mood is much better than the beginning of the negotiations, when you might remember Russians would not even talk and listen to the position of Ukrainian side. That would just make their ultimatums and red lines. So today, as of today and as of yesterday, there is a slight optimism as far as the possible results of the negotiations are concerned. But you have to understand that these are only provisional negotiations. The final negotiations and settlements should be reached during the negotiations of presidents. So definitely President Putin has to be put on the table himself, with my president, with President Zelensky, and together with the foreign leaders, because we need what we need out of these negotiations, except bringing settlement and peace to my country, except of ceasefire, except of withdrawal of Russian troops from the territory of Ukraine. The no less important thing is to have the hard security guarantees for my country in future, for these awful aggressions not to happen in future against my country or against any European country, because we have to understand that if we not stop Russians today in Ukraine, tomorrow they might come to our neighboring states, to Poland or some Baltic countries, then they go further into Europe. So you in Greece should also understand this. So we are now fighting against the aggressor on our territory, and we will do this. But for the time being, already we have to think what should be changed in the system of collective security in Europe in order for these situations not to happen in the future. That's why a complex package of security guarantees has to be reached during these negotiations. And as you might understand, that would take some time.
What actually gives you the idea that something really crucial is going to change in these negotiation talks, given the fact that there has been already 3 rounds of talks, and Russian claims that the Ukrainian side is going there not prepared? What are the concrete suggestions that would you like to put through in order for Russians to negotiate with you?
No, that's absolute false. Ukrainian delegation is prepared, and we want not only the agreements reached during negotiations, but they should be implemented. Just I will give you an example. During the 2nd round of negotiations, we reached an agreement on humanitarian corridors functioning in Ukraine. And only several days ago, the first corridors start to function from the north of my country, from the east of my country, and partially from south of my country. While there was and still is the difficult, absolutely awful situation in Mariupol, where, by the way, a Greek community is also living. So they are blocking the city throughout all 2 weeks already. And only yesterday we started to evacuate some people from this city, but still they're not allowing their humanitarian convoy in the city to come with their food, water, medicine, etc. 400,000 inhabitants were absolutely blockaded. Again, the agreement was reached during negotiations on the humanitarian corridor. No possibility to start it as of the day of yesterday. So that's what I'm telling about. We are ready. We are ready for the negotiations. We have our conditions. Again, I have to remind you that immediate ceasefire should be implemented, because when you have the serious negotiations, to make a ceasefire during this negotiation, then you have to talk about the withdrawal of troops. But again, what they are now doing and why they are wasting their time is they think they still would conquer something on the ground. So you asked me about Kiev, not only Kiev that they want to encircle the city of Kharkiv, for instance, which is a symbolic city for them in the east of Ukraine. They want to encircle Odessa, for instance, which is a very symbolic city on the Black Sea. They want to squeeze Mariupol, again, very symbolic city for all of us, for you Greeks, for us Ukrainians. But I think they will fail in this regard.
Allow me to ask you, there are so many topics that I would like to ask you about, but let's take a step back. You said that one of the key negotiation talks needs to take place between the President Zelensky, President Putin, as well as European leaders. The question is, why do the European leaders need to actually sit with both presidents in order to have these negotiation talks? What kind of pressure do you think they can actually exercise on President Putin in order to withdraw his troops, or just to, come to complete ceasefire?
Well, every foreign leader with whom my president is talking, and my president talking every day with up to 10 world leaders, everyone is asked to make their input into the peaceful settlement in Ukraine. We have to understand, if we're talking about possible next development of situation, we have to guarantee the security of Europe. We cannot have only guarantees from Russia. Unfortunately, the guarantees of Russia for the time being are worthless, Secondly, I want to give you an example. When Ukraine was deprived out of third world's largest nuclear potential, we acquired the document which was called Budapest Memorandum. And those Budapest Memorandums signed by Russia, by UK, and by the US should have guaranteed the security of Ukraine. This piece of paper, unfortunately, has never worked, neither in 2014, when Russia started its aggression against the Crimea and part of Donbas, nor this year, when they started an open war against Ukraine. So we do not want false guarantees now. So we would like to have a full-fledged security guarantees from all the international players, not only neighbors of Ukraine. Russia is a neighbor and will always be. We have our neighbors in the west of Ukraine, but also the US, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, the European Union altogether. They have to be responsible for this situation. Once again, Ukraine is fighting now for Europe, for all of you, for Greece, for France, for Germany. But you have to all be here with us in thinking about possible future, not only of Ukraine, but of Europe as a whole.
Mr. Zhovkva, President Zelensky has repeatedly asked for NATO to provide some sort of cover and security over the Ukrainian skies, which has not been accepted. And the question is, what lies next? Because he will be addressing the US Congress for the second time in just less than 10 days. What do you expect to change?
Well, unfortunately, NATO lacks its bravery or courageousness to implement this decision about a no-fly zone. Again, that is the responsibility of all the NATO countries. And, my president is openly saying when the cruise missiles or airstrikes are going on against civilian people of Ukraine, there's definitely the blame should be put on Russia because they are aggressors, but the rest of the states which are not, doing anything in this regard should also understand their responsibility as well. If no-fly zone is implemented, and for the time being this is the case, we ask from our partners who are able to do this additional capacities which will help us to defend the sky. I'm talking about air defense system. I'm talking about counter-missile defense system. I'm talking about fighter jets of Soviet origin, just MiGs and Su, which are left in some countries of the European Union, and which can be easily given to Ukraine to defend its sky. This is what you can do. I mean, the European Union, NATO. This is what the US can do. And yes, right, you are speaking tomorrow in the Congress. My president will talk about this, as well as he will talk about the sanctions, because sanctions, this is another front of countering the Russian aggression. The current level of sanctions introduced by the European Union is far away of what is needed for my country in order to tackle Russian aggression. If you are talking about SWIFT, you should disconnect not only 7 minor banks of Russia from the SWIFT, but all the major banks like Gazprom Bank, like Sberbank, and all the others. If we are talking about embargo, yes, the EU should think about introducing embargo on Russian imports, oil, gas, and coal. You have to understand how it is that you should live without Russian gas. It's possible. We live in Ukraine without Russian gas. It's possible. We can tell you how to do this. If we're talking about financial assets, you have to close Russian accounts in the European banks. You have to close ports of the European Union for Russian commodities. So still much to be done by the European Union in this regard.
You also mentioned that you would actually ask for some fighter jets. Well, Poland was the one that said, here you are, you may have ours, but it is up to the US to provide those to Ukraine. On the other hand, the Russian president said that anyone who will provide any kind of help, as well as those airports that the fighter jets will be actually taking off, will be considered an enemy, a hostile nation. Are you not afraid that this may actually start a third world war?
You know, we're not afraid of anything. We're not afraid of Putin. We're fighting the war against him for the 20th day already, and for the 8th year fighting his aggression. We do not like this ping pong which is being done between some states, not only by the about fighter jets. Again, I'm telling you, there are some other equipment which could be provided to Ukraine. Again, I will not talk here on the details in the open air, but please do understand this is possible. The only thing you need is the will and the courage. Everything is possible, discussable, and would help to my country.
Do you think, Mr. Zhovkva, that there is no political will from the West Alliance?
Absolutely, absolutely. My president should be an example, and his example not only for Ukrainian people, but for the world leaders as well, for the leaders of the European Union. You could ask their people in the streets of Athens, of some other capitals, do they support, for instance, entering Ukraine into the EU? They would say majority of them, and we have the necessary opinion polls, more than 60% in each of your countries say yes, while your leaders, for instance, say no. They say no to the SWIFT procedure of adopting Ukraine to the EU. As the same, they say no about additional sanctions and additional weapons. So we ask every European leader we talk to, please be brave, please be courageous, as the president of Ukraine is doing now.
Even if the Ukraine enters or starts the procedure to become part of the European Union, do you not think that this is going to take a few years? It cannot actually be done in just a single night.
Yeah, well, we are really, it's not a single night, but you know, we are not in normal conditions like one of the presidents of are saying today. We are in unnormal conditions. This is a war, not only a war in Ukraine, a war in Europe. So yes, we urge the European bureaucrats, we urge the bureaucrats in member states, please be a little bit quicker vis-a-vis Ukraine. Please do not mix Ukraine with Moldova and Georgia, who are having another conditions. Yes, those two countries are also suffering from the Russian aggression, but they are not waging an open war. If you treat Ukraine now in the state of war the same as Moldova and Georgia, that would be unfair to my people. That's why now there's a technical process. Our application is being regarded by the European Commission, but we ask every European leader to think every day about Ukraine, how to make it more close and more swift to the members of the European family. Since we are fighting for all of you, for all the Europeans, we deserve to be the right to be a full-fledged member of the European Union. And let's forget about bureaucracy and usual routine, which we unfortunately have in the European Union.
There are apparently more than 1 million people staying stranded in Kiev, as well as about 800,000 people in Odessa, waiting for the Russians to invade. do you think that this actually may become a bloodshed?
Yes, that's already becoming bloodshed in many cities of my country, in smaller cities. For the time being, they haven't managed to encircle any large city, which they want to do. Even some cities which they are encircling or invading to, and they try to establish the occupation power. Ukrainians are severely protesting against this. Let's take the city of Kherson, for instance, where people protesting every day on the street with national flags, singing national anthem, do not recognizing the occupation authority. Or let's take the small city of Melitopol near on the south of Ukraine, where they kidnapped the mayor of the city, and are now having them in prison. He refused to recognize the occupation power. They tried to install so-called acting mayor, but people are protesting, and Ukraine is demanding. That's absolutely awful. When you kidnapping a mayor, we ask the Red Cross, we ask the world leaders to help us in depriving him from prison. So yes, they will be trying to do this in the larger cities, but for the time being, they are unsuccessful, and they will always be unsuccessful here.
I would also like to ask you about the ethnic Greeks in Mariupol, which is about 100 or more than 100,000 people. Are there any specific plans to protect these ethnic minorities, given the fact that both Mr. Dendias, the Greek foreign minister, visited Russia in the past as well as Ukraine, in order to discuss this protection of the ethnic minorities? What are you prepared to do?
Well, we are protecting every ethnic minority in the city of Mariupol, in the neighboring cities, as well as protecting all the population in this city, 400,000 people. But
Mm-hmm.
when there are airstrikes on the maternity hospital, like there was a case several days before, and when 17 were injured and 3 died, unfortunately, including 1 baby. That's awful, and the world community have to react on this regard. So yes, your prime minister has to be more pushing on President Putin, as well as we are doing. We're asking all the international humanitarian organizations to help. The Red Cross is helping us now, though at the beginning they were a little bit reluctant and reacting, slowly. We all should do this. Like I told you, from today, the people started to being evacuated from the city of Mariupol. Previously, they were not eager to do this on the simple reason they wanted all the population, all the majority of the population of the city to support Russian authorities. So the Greek ethnic minority should also not, fall under this danger of supporting the Russian occupying power. I think, and I'm sure, they are feeling themselves Ukrainians. They are Ukrainians, and they will never support the occupation power. Thus, they will help us to bring this city back to the Ukrainian soil.
Mr. Zhovkva, Ukraine is actually one of the most important producers as well exporters of cereals and supplies, not only to European countries but to Asian as well as African countries. What are you going to do about the demand that is actually increasing right now, given the fact that your exports are actually too much to lose, and they bring you a big income as well in the country?
Well, yes, now, and you are putting a very good question. The economy should also be, surviving in Ukraine, because we have to be economically strong in these times of war. I would also remind you, for instance, that Ukraine is a huge agrarian country. We are having large agriculture potential, and the sowing campaign, which has to start now because it's springtime already, is now about to start, but it would be much more harder for us to do this. We are talking, our government, our agriculture minister is doing their best to start the sowing campaign, but unfortunately it's very hard. And all the world community has to understand this fact also, that Ukraine, right you are, is one of the strongest economy in the world, and is and will be the supplier for many countries, not only Asia but the European Union as well, by the way, because our agriculture comes to your markets as well, our chicken, our poultry, agriculture, etc. So yes, we're thinking about this, but we also have to have here the support of the community.
Excuse me, how will you achieve this when most of the people are actually barricaded in the big cities, and they cannot go out in the farms, in the the agricultural environment in order to raise their crops? How are they going to do that?
Yeah, so first of all, not all the country has been, encircled and occupied. Even in the occupied or temporarily occupied regions, people are going to raise the crops. Just I will give you the example in Kherson region, which is, yes, the city is occupied, but the people today are coming out to raise the crops. They are carrying national flags, Ukrainian flags, singing the national anthem, but they are doing their job. And believe me, they will be doing their job, even under the guns of the Russian invaders. But again, here, you all have to understand, this is also important for all of you. Ukraine is ready to do its best to stay a country which, is a breadbasket for Europe and for the world and in the rest sectors of the economy as well. But please help us to push the president aggressor to stop the war against my country.
I'm going back to what you said before about a potential talk between President Zelensky and President Putin. When do you think this will take place?
We hear the Russian Federation side that still some work has to be done on the level of negotiations on the negotiation teams. We are ready. I cannot, make any forecast here because
An estimate, maybe?
Well. We want to happen as soon as possible.
It was only on Sunday, I believe, that President Zelensky has actually come forward and said and talked about the casualties from the Ukrainian side, whereas on the Russian side we have big death tolls. Allow me to ask you, there are about 1,300 Ukrainians that have actually died for the time being. Is that correct?
Well, you heard my president. That's the numbers he told.
So, what do you think? How many still need to actually die in order for this war to end in a way that satisfies both you and maybe the Russians in order to come to terms with them?
That's the rhetoric question which we ask our European partners as well. How long would you still sit and watch while every hour, every minute, Ukrainian civilians and soldiers are dying? Definitely, if you would ask my president, he would tell you immediately, we are ready to peace, we are ready to talks, and ready to stop in the war. Unfortunately, this is not the case for President Putin. But unfortunately, this is even more dangerous, that not all the international partners understand that this is a real war going in Ukraine and could spread to any other European country every minute. So please help us, all of you, please help us to bring this war immediately to the end.
Mr. Zhovkva, thank you very much for being with us. It's been an honor, sir.